Last time, you might remember that we went through briefly the feedback that we've had so far. Then we went through the design options as they've evolved according to that feedback. And then we all get to break out and have our voices heard by going up to the boards with our Sharpies and our stickers and putting stickers on the things that we like, and using the Sharpies to write down comments that we think are important and that we want to have documented, because all of this is documented. So the survey, Michael can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think we have more than 100 more survey results than we had last time around. It's like 285 now, something like that. I'll be honest with you, not much has changed in the way of interpreting the survey results. One of the things that jumped out at me is that there were a lot more people who liked audiobooks than last time around, but that's about the only big jump that we had. But I'll go through the summary really quickly, so for those who weren't here last time around. Okay, so for the survey results, it's pretty obvious. Most people are from around here, have a library card, and have been to the Blaine Library, so that's good. They know what they're talking about. Top improvements, and we'll see this in the word cloud coming up, which I did update, but it's pretty much the same. Space, bigger, larger, modern, space, pretty much in that order. Comfortable seating options, and then of course the dichotomy between wanting to have quiet spaces and having active spaces. So we hopefully accommodate that in our options as well. What role could the library play? Community gathering and revitalization of downtown remain pretty similar to last time. And then what collections are most important? Audiobooks makes it in. Didn't make it in last time around. And top library programs, still educational in classes. And then 66 of respondents, actually I think that's slightly lower. It is 66% of respondents don't have children in their households. So it's good to get input from children and teens as to what they want to see in the library. The survey doesn't necessarily take that into consideration as much as the staff and the people of the community know that they do. And then 78% would consider contributing to the building fund, so way to go. All right, here we are, the big words. Area, larger, bigger, larger. Library, obviously. Space, spacious. And then modern made a big improvement as far as its word cloud presence. And then these are the boards from last time around, from the Developing Character Community Meeting. And I'll summarize these, you don't have to get up and read them. So two of the options I think resonated with people more than the third, which was I think called Hip to Be Square. The beacon and the boat. And so I narrowed it down, and you'll see that they've sort of been narrowed down in tonight's presentation to two options rather than three. We've tried to take the input from what we learned so far from the last meeting till now and incorporate them into those options. So beacon, bring the outdoors in. 2 stories, nice interior organization, and fun spaces. Flip the boat. People like the boat, but they all thought it was facing the wrong way. So we flipped the boat. Iconic building, green roof, sustainable. Naming and sponsorship opportunities and the incorporation of art were all comments that went along with that. In general, friends of the Blaine Library Bookstore, very important. Getaway spaces and active spaces. Again, this dichotomy of wanting to have a little bit of both within the library, which is important. More storage. We've added more storage. And lastly, we do have one of the options with the fireplace. So I know that there are pros and cons, and so let your voice be heard on the fireplace option. Site, open space, drive-up book drop, the view down G Street, which I think we've addressed in both of the schemes tonight, and then blocking the view of the police station. One of the things that we heard last time around was that there was a lot of windows, maybe not presence, but windows looking out at the police station. And that's not really a great view. So we've tried to make that not necessarily the back of the building, but when we do put fenestration on that side of the building, it's higher so that you're not looking directly into the fence. All right, and between the last meeting and today, we've had an eco charrette. And so I want Tim to come up and talk to us about that.
Thank you. So if we get some state funding for this project, then we're going to be required to meet LEED Silver. And so in order to keep that, that option available, we decided to, we didn't have an official eco-charrette meeting, which involves the entire design team, which is all of the engineers and whatnot. And so those folks are not on board at this point yet. So what we did is just took a first look at the goals that we wanted to achieve for sustainability. And so we held a kickoff meeting, and Carol was part of that, along with the architects. So we have 6 major categories. There's a few more shown here, but there's 6 of the major categories that are shown. And in order to get LEED Silver, we're required to get 50 points. So down in that column. So we've, in this first go around, we've achieved the 50 points, and we also have 22 in the maybe column. So usually as we go through the design with the entire team, we may find that some drop off and some will go from the maybe into the for sure side. So in the first category, the location and transportation, what we do there is we look at proximity to other services in the area, particularly bus routes, make sure that we're close to a bus route to eliminate traffic as much as we can. One of the big facilities, or one of the things that we would also look at is green vehicles. And I understand that the library does have a few green vehicles, and that also requires that we install a charging station.
Do you have copies of that for handouts?
We don't, but we could make copies of this available to the library and to Michael. And the next one would be sustainable sites. So what we would be looking at there is we've already got a developed site. So we're going to be a little bit limited on the points that we can garner for this area. But what we would be looking at are rainwater management, stormwater runoff, those sorts of things. Heat island effect, so we would try and cover the parking lot with some shading to minimize our heat sink from the parking lot, and then make sure we don't pollute the area with light from our site. Water efficiency, we would be looking at, that's the third one there. We'd be looking at minimizing indoor and outdoor water, both for landscape irrigation and building water usage in the building, so low flow fixtures. And the fourth one is energy and atmosphere. This has the potential for the greatest number of points, and this area would deal with how the building performs. And so we would be required to build an energy model of our building and kind of model that from early design all the way through construction drawings to make sure that it qualifies. And we'd be looking at well-insulated buildings, tight envelopes, green roofs would be a big part of that. If we'd obviously be looking into that. And then solar power also would garner quite a few points there, so that would be looked at in that category. Materials and resources, that's the fifth category, and there we would be looking at what products we put in the building, how much recycled content a product would have, and whether it was locally made. So the goal there would be to try and get more local materials so that we're not shipping costs aren't impacted. The last major category is indoor environmental quality. And there we would be looking at using materials that have low emissivity. So that's off-gassing, the smelly stuff. So we'd be using products that, again, don't contribute to bad air quality in the building once it's complete. In this category, we'd also be looking at daylighting. So that's a major component in a building, well-lit building with lots of daylight. And make sure that folks inside the building have good views from everywhere, from each room in the building. And then the last item is having good acoustics. So that would mean the mechanical systems, make sure that they're not very noisy, and also having good quality acoustics within each of the spaces. So in a nutshell, that's what we went through, and we will certainly be fine-tuning this with the consultants as we move forward in the rest of the design process.
So now we'll walk through where we are with programming and then where these two designs are landing. This is a summary of the program chart. This is the program chart, as you might recall, and what that does is take similar libraries and the types of materials, quantities of materials in those libraries in a certain area, size of library, and tune them up to meet the interests and needs and comments that we've received from you folks. So these all translate from numbers of books to numbers of square feet, or numbers of seats to numbers of square feet. They're all summarized in areas for each of the program components. The entry, the all-important friends sale area, and bathrooms are a little over 1,000 square feet, and then meeting room and storage, another 1,000 plus. There are utility aspects, mechanical, electrical, plumbing rooms. There's a workroom, the library staff workroom, and it includes not only a place to work and process materials, but staff lounge and staff restroom. And then the area that you arrive at when you enter the library, where the quick reads are, where the service point is, where you might check out your books. And then we have a small meeting room, two small meeting rooms, one of which is kind of a crafts, maybe maker space, and then children's area, a little over 1,000 square feet there, a teen area, and then the rest of the services, which is the two major collections, fiction, nonfiction, and study areas, lounge areas, and a fireplace area. And then there's some additional space that's general circulation. This calculation and this analysis comes out right at about 9,000 square feet. And we've been drawing something a little bit smaller than that, 8,600 I think in the two solutions here. We've managed to include all the things we've identified as appropriate for a library this size, with this community, with the interests you have. So as we move forward and in our final solution, we'll see what more we can fit in this size library. The shapes we're working with are very efficient, so we're finding that they work very well to accommodate the program that would be appropriate for the community. The first design, the flip the boat design, which was originally the boat because of this shape here, which is like the hull of, inspired from the hull of a boat, from some of the nautical heritage of Blaine. Originally it was down here. We were thinking, well, kind of a lantern as you look up third, you'd feel like, gee, that's a public building there. I want to maybe emphasize that the library is one of the few things you get to use as a public governmental agency to influence the town you have. And so making the library something that is clearly a special place that everybody's invited to is part of what we try to achieve. So when we flipped the boat, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. We put this lantern-like boat hole shape towards the north end and be visible down G Street, and also to some extent down 3rd, because we gave it a little bit of a cant. So as you're coming up 3rd, you'd see this facade, and you'd also see the lantern of the entry of the library. Coming in then, there's the Friends sale area and meeting room, restrooms, catering, kitchen. All of those are arranged in such a way that they can be open off when the library is not, so off hours. And then once you enter, there's the service point, media, hot picks, the quick materials that you might want to get at, new books, things like that. Catalog, computer catalogs. This has been a feature we've used in several libraries, which is kind of a bar that looks out on the street, but also is connected to the library proper. As you go in further, this is the work area, a drive-by book drop, and then the children's area to the right. These are something we've been using that we call the parent perch, which is a place that a parent or a grandparent could sit and maybe be close to some adult materials and be able to access those, but also keep an eye on the kid that's there with. And then farther in here, periodicals and lounge and study space in this form here. You'll see in the later drawings that this is kind of an aspiring roof form that rises up. Tucked under it is a small meeting room here and another one here. The teens are back in this corner, so fairly observable, but not so much they feel like they would be overly observed. And teen collection, and then the general collection here. And then this is the drive lane for that drop-off.
Where's the used bookstore?
It's right in the entry, right here. And then we haven't really, I think in the next cycle we'll really get into it, but all these spaces have a nice connection to the outside. Here, around the boat shape, off of the teen meeting room, and off of this back area as well, and off the children's area. So this scatters the available space on the site around so that a lot of the interior places of the library will have access to those. And here you can see that in a little more 3 dimensions. As you're coming up 3rd, you see the entry of the library, you enter the meeting room complex and restrooms. The entry point where you really get your bearings and have access to the things you might want to just pop in and grab that new book that you've been thinking about, or check on some other aspect of the information or things available here. The small meeting room close in, a nice variety of lounge space and study space, periodicals, the children's area just around the corner from the service point, so fairly supervisable. And then the teens tucked away in the corner here in that collection.
Where's parking?
Parking is in the surrounding area and is not on the site proper. So the general parking on the streets is how we've been accommodating parking for the building. And then these images, when we break out later, you'll be able to see they show some of those concepts, the cone of silence chair, the playful children's area that could evolve further here. That idea of a lantern that really connects to the outside. A meeting room that is nicely sized for tutoring or a small collaborative effort from maybe some kids. And then that kind of place that you can see who's coming and going, be part of the activity, but also be part of the library at the same time. So here's a view as you're coming up 3rd Street with the entry, where it's rendered right now in brick, is a material that's kind of preferred in town, and so it's something we would like to use. There's closer in. And then the other end of the building with the boat hull shape. Landscape around it. And then this would be, let me see, I do want to clarify this a little bit. The idea here is that this This is a roof that is maybe a little bit special. It's the main reading room, and so that might be an exposed wood, heavy timber roof. This roof back here is low slope or flat, and probably a fairly utilitarian ceiling plane, and providing the right kind of acoustic signatures and lighting and all the things you might need in those areas. So here you see that primary roof, and then off to the side, back in here would be a lower, flatter ceiling over the children's area and the stacks. Still something nice though. There, that using the the architecture of boat building is maybe a cue to inform how we design that boat reading room. And then the other one, the beacon, is organized a little bit on a similar in a similar way, but the entry is up at the corner of G and 3rd. You come in, and the entry gallery with the friends and the quick access holds also connects to the bathrooms and the meeting room and the catering kitchen. So all of this can be open off hours. And then when you enter the library, this is that area of discovery of the quick reads and other things that you might want to get at quickly. Catalogs, the service point, workroom is along here. This does not show a drive-by boat drop, so we could probably find a way to get that to work, but it adds a little more parking close to the entry. So there's maybe a bit of a trade-off there. And then farther in, the teen area is close to the entry in this case, so in our design of it, the way we design that, the book stacks enclosing the teen area will be important to make it feel like it's not too much in the spotlight. And then moving farther in, the catalogs, the fireplace living room-like area, children's area, and the general collections here. So this one in 3 dimensions again. Entry up on the corner, the staff workroom here, the meeting room and restroom complex here, and then that entry sequence with holds, quick reads, the teen area, the fireplace, living room, the general collections. This one has a nice little alcove off to the side that's not really a meeting room, but it's a little bit removed from some of the rest of the areas and would most likely be used for collaboration. This also shows a treatment we use sometimes, which is to put a sliding door system between the children's area and the meeting room. So when it's story hour, you just open up those sliding doors, the kids can move right into the meeting room and engage in that without having to flow through the rest of the library. We've articulated this one with 2 sloped roofs. And here you see that, see the entry down at this end, but that meeting room window there. There you see that again. And then the entry at the other end in this corner. And again, probably a heavy timber roof system, brick wall. So this would be wood, and then the brick down low. And I think the lighting, we would really use the wood to give warmth to the space. So we have a certain percentage of the lighting would go upward to help give a nice ambient quality to the space. Entry closer in. There's that quick, fairly abstract still view of that living room area with the fireplace. Teen area. And I think that's about the last of it.